Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Susie Davis. She is an author, speaker, and co-founder of Austin Christian Fellowship. She's married to her high school sweetheart, Will Davis Jr., and they have three incredibly delightful young people. Well, Susie joins us this morning to talk about her latest book that really pricks the heart of women and mothers. It's entitled Dear Daughters, Love Letters to the Next Generation. Susie, all the way from Austin, Texas, we welcome her to the OPT Network. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm so glad to be here. It's so nice to talk with you today.
Indeed. So, Susie, your journey really started some time ago where you never really thought probably, or did you think in your lifetime that you'd be writing books?
I had a big God dream that I would write books one day, and God brought that to fruition about 6 books ago. So it's been
about 6 books ago.
About 6 books ago. So it's been so much fun, and I've just had. He's been so kind to me and let me do lots of different fun things in different ways to encourage people about the gospel message. So it's been really fun.
So tell me about the letters that you started writing to your daughters that got traction, that really sort of gave birth to this book.
Right. My girls, I have 3 kids. We have a son who's the oldest, and then we have 2 girls. And really it started when when they were in high school, they would invite friends over, and I would find myself across the kitchen counter talking to these girls about life and about God. And it was a very organic kind of thing. Well, then when they went away to college and social media kind of jumped in, I would write little short, what I say, love letters to my girls online and to the girls that also I'd met through my kids. And that got some traction, and people really responded to them. And I realized that there are a lot of young women out there who want just an older woman to come along and, help them understand that, things are going to be okay, and to talk things out. And so that's how it started. And then it turned into a podcast, and then it turned into a book.
Wow. And so in the book, you write about all of the daughters that you have acquired. You didn't birth any of them, but, they became your spiritual daughters over time, and how they just started, they had a yearning to find answers and to need advice. And you started filling that gap. When did you know that this had become a ministry?
I think I committed my life to ministry when I was 16. And so I feel like the things that I do are ministry, but specifically with this, with Dear Daughters, I think it was so organic and natural to me. And I felt like I had enough love in my heart to give to another young woman besides just my own daughters. And so it started like that, very organically, until, like you said, I accumulated a lot of Dear Daughters, and then so many that, and people reach out online, they'll say, will you mentor me? And I've had to turn away because I'm not able to. And that's when I realized, like, these other spiritual mamas need to step up and step into the lives of these young women. They don't want someone who's perfect or who has a degree in theology. They just want a wise woman to talk things out with about, like I said, life and God and love and just their everyday kinds of things. And we as older women, it's like a sacred trust. I mean, to be able to be a minister of the gospel is like amazing. And then to think of it in terms of being like a spiritual mother, to me, is just like, that excites me to think that God can do something beautiful for somebody else by just me repeating a pattern I've had with my own children. And you don't have to be a mother to actually be a spiritual mama. It's just someone who's had some life experience that turns around and takes somebody younger by the hand and says, yeah, I'll help you walk through this. I'll help you find God in your life. I'll help you know that he's still there and that everything's going to be okay. It's that kind of thing.
I love the book, and I love the beauty of the book, not just the aesthetics of the book, but what's in the book. And I think you're right on point. A lot of us have to step up and be spiritual mothers. And it was so apropos because here we are at Mother's Day, and there's so many women and people that have lost mothers, that have gone home to be with the Lord, and they don't feel like they have somebody else, because you feel like you get one mother, and if she's a great mother, then wonderful. But if she's no longer there, you don't feel like you have someone that is sage in wisdom and can walk you through. But that's quite the contrary, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree, and it's so true. And I had a great mother, and I have a great mother. She's actually still living, and I'm so grateful for Mimi. But I also realized that a lot of women have had mothers who are absent somehow spiritually. Maybe they weren't spiritual, or maybe they were distracted by their life situation, like a loss of a job or a divorce can really, wreck a mother, and she can get so whirled up in the hard things in her life that she forgets this responsibility to turn around and be available and be the older person, even in a mother-daughter relationship. So I've seen so many girls that aren't just missing their mothers physically through death, but also just women who, that they can turn to. There are just a lot of young women who are believers that just want a spiritual, kind of a spiritual perspective on their life and encouragement.
And what I really like about the book is the encouragement. And whether you are a spirit-filled woman or not, there are spirit-filled women who can step into the gap. And we forget on this journey, we've met so many different stories. And Peg Streep comes to mind. She wrote a book called Mean Moms. And what we have to understand is that every mother that birthed a baby was not necessarily a good mother or a mother ready for motherhood. And that's where this book and the context and the heart of this book, I think, comes in.
Well, I think for many women, their older women are intimidated about what to say or how to do it, or they think they have to have a Bible study to walk through it. And the truth is, for me in my life, I found that availability is one of the key things. And then when I'm talking to one of these women, whether they're, in my garden with me, or they're in the kitchen, or, it's just listening to their story, asking questions, which I have a lot of questions in the book. There's a lot of opportunity for thoughtful, things going on, to listen for, God's voice in your daily circumstances, things like that. I ask a lot of questions, but it's just like asking questions and listening, and being able to listen with, ears of a spiritual mama to these younger women who are just hungry for guidance and life advice. And it's like, for me, I wish every woman, and I have a spiritual mother. I mean, my mother was great, and she's spiritual, but I have other spiritual mothers. We need voices of other women in our life just besides our mother. And so I want to be that. And I also want to have that. I want to have that in my own life.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, but the other women that can speak into your life. And your mother and my mother don't necessarily have everything, and there are always pieces. And I believe that God uses others. And on this journey, before she went home to be with the Lord, we had the opportunity to interview Dr. Maya Angelou. And one of the things that she talked about were her spiritual daughters.
Oh.
And she said, as you well know, I didn't birth any daughters. I had one son, but I have many spiritual daughters. And I
Yeah.
think that the world is a better place when women come together.
Right.
And we come together in prayer, and we come together in unanimity. And that's what this book really allows women to do, to talk about their biggest, most daunting fears and uncertainties, and have someone speak back into their lives. We're going to take a break here, Susie, but when we come back, we're going to share some of the stories and some of the commentary that you write about in the book that we believe is going to be instrumental in helping many women. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Susie Davis. She's an author, a speaker, and the co-founder of Austin Christian Fellowship. And she has written the neatest, cutest little book that really speaks to the heart of women and mothers. It's entitled Dear Daughters, Love Letters to the Next Generation. And with this book, you're trying to cross generations. It's not just one generation.
Right.
It's many generations. Why do you think it's so important that mothers begin to speak to the hearts of their daughters?
Because I know that I would not be who I am without the older women that have spoken into my life. I can think my own dear mother has taken care of me and nurtured me and grown me spiritually, but also some of her friends that, I remember the lady up the street, Georgia Dewey, and I would go to her house and just how she took me in. And yeah, she was making bologna sandwiches for me and handing them across the counter, but she was also like that woman who inspired me creatively and who was there to like guide me when I would stay at her house when my parents were out of town. Those are the women. You think it's like not a big deal if you're that person, but if you're that person in a young woman's life that is available and there, on point, like you have so much capacity to encourage and provide guidance. And those little eyes, whether they're 20-year-old eyes or 12-year-old eyes or 52-year-old eyes looking up at that woman, that is such a beautiful opportunity to be the hope of Jesus in someone's life. And it's so organic and natural. It happens all the time, every day in our lives, So for me, I just think of it's just a sacred trust. That's what I think of it as,
A
being able
sacred
to
trust.
be,
That's good.
yeah, in someone's life in that way and have someone in my life that way.
Sure. And one of the stories that you wrote in the book, you went back to your 14-year-old self and
Right.
how that time in your life could have been catastrophic and really could have changed your life forever. Tell us about that.
Well, when I became a believer at 12, and then at 14, I was in my classroom at school, and a neighbor boy who lived up the street from me, who was also in my classroom, came in with a rifle and shot and killed our teacher. And this was a long time ago when things like that didn't happen. And for me, it created a fear stronghold in my life. And I developed into a relationship with God where I loved God. I loved him, I really did. But I just didn't trust him because I felt like if he really loved me, then he would have been there and kept me from seeing that, would have kept my teacher from dying, would have kept my neighbor from doing it. I felt like maybe God was too busy and he was on the other side of the world when it happened. So I developed this fear stronghold that lasted a couple decades. But God is ever faithful. He's the healer and he's a good father. And he ended up breaking off that fear stronghold in my life, which is a whole nother book called Unafraid.
Sure.
But
And I don't want to leave that story without talking about strongholds, whether they're
yeah,
fear, whatever they are. They are sometimes little things, but they can grab a hold of us. And as you said, it could keep you there in fear for 20 years.
yeah.
What was the key, if there is such a thing, to breaking that stronghold so that you could then go out and grow the ministry or birth the ministry that God had for you?
I think for me, the key to, there were a lot of little things, but it came down to, there's a verse in Psalm 22, and it starts in verse 1 and 2, and David's just crying out to God, and he's saying, you know what, God, you know what, my life is horrible, and where have you been? That same thing I described as what I was feeling, but not talking about on the inside. Like, where have you been, God? And then verse 3, which is 22:3 in the Psalm, says, yet you are holy. And I had to have a yet you are holy kind of moment with God where I said, okay, fine. Like, I don't get why why I had to experience that hard thing. I don't understand how come the circumstances that were created by that created a lot of pain and suffering in my life, but you're still holy. And there's probably someone watching right now that's like, I can totally relate to that. I didn't see someone murdered, but my parents got divorced when I was little, and it was a hard, horrible divorce. Or maybe they've experienced some illness, and it's created this anxiety in their life and this feeling like, they feel out of control, and they see how their life has been ripped apart by it. And they might just need to surrender to God. And yet you're holy, God. You're holy, even though I don't understand.
Indeed. And so throughout the book, what you do is you give us little snippets of everyday challenges that women write in or have shared with you
Right.
about their heart's sadness or their uncertainties. And one of the things that you talk about is a young woman who her dad, for all intents and purposes, they had a beautiful life and everything is good, but she finds out that her dad had been unfaithful to her mother. And this changes the way that she looks at life, really. What do we say to people like that, where it just changes the trajectory of everything they knew to be true?
The first thing I would say, and I did say to that young woman, is I am so sorry. I'm so sorry for the pain that's been interjected into your life through someone that should have taken care of you. And I think that's like the motherly piece that a lot of people want. They want someone to let them be sad, let
Mhm.
them express the feelings. And then honestly, for me in that girl's situation, I just listened to her. It was a lot of listening and a
Mhm.
lot of gently pointing back to God and realizing that those kinds of traumas sometimes take years to get over.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's the whole point of being a spiritual mama is just being available. And she texts me, we talk, I'll text her back a prayer, we meet sometimes. But just walking her through that hard thing, I think we all need people in our life. Women
Mhm.
need women to walk through these kinds of things. So that's really, and unfortunately, as you well know, that's like life. Everybody has those things that come up.
Mhm. And I think that it sets women and girls up for um, that relationship with their dad that gets marred. It's that first relationship before any man, you have that
That's
relationship
right.
or you don't have that relationship
That's
with
right.
your dad. And you write about that. I want to take a break here, but when we come back, I want to talk about those first relationships and the way the family dynamic is set up today. Those first relationships are not necessarily in place where there is a literal father, an earthly father in
Right.
that situation. And a lot of women really don't understand the dynamic of how to have the next relationship because they hadn't had the first one. We're going to take a break here, but when we come back, we'll take a deeper dive into that circumstance. Stay on point. We're back after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. We're Mother's Day is here, really, and every day should be Mother's Day. Our guest this morning is Susie Davis. Her book is entitled Dear Daughters, Love Letters to the Next Generation. And before we went to a break, Susie, we were talking about fathers and that first relationship that girls should hopefully have is with their father, with a loving father. But the way that the family dynamic looks today, that's not always true. And so when girls don't see that, sometimes they don't really understand that next relationship. How do we speak to that?
Well, one of the things my husband says, and he's a pastor, that many women and men and women both see God through the context of their father. And so there's no perfect father anywhere. I mean, there are definitely fathers who are intentional and try really hard, but it's really important, I think, for us to be able to be in a whole, to be able to be whole in any relationship is to first get your view of who God is as a good father. And that takes a lot, sometimes it takes a lot of time if you have to work through an earthly father who's not been a good role model and not been loving and not been a good example. So that's a first step. And sometimes it takes deep work. Like sometimes that takes going to a therapist and talking with a Christian counselor or a pastor and really working that out. The heart stuff that's gone on and the head stuff that's gone on and find out where you are. And then that puts you in a better position to be able to be who you need to be in a relationship and marriage, and so on and so
So
forth.
with so many mentees, if you will, Susie, do you have to spend a lot of time in prayer just to to juggle them all and to really be present for the women who, and I'm sure they don't need you all the time, but when they do need you, so that you know that you're not speaking from your head, but speaking from the spirit.
Like I said, it's a sacred trust. That's how I feel about it. And so there's a lot of times where I have to tell people no, that I can't mentor them. And I'll try to place them or encourage placement with a different woman. But for me, it's with these girls that I meet with and encourage, I think of them like my daughters. So I don't just think of them when I'm on the phone with them or when I'm, in person with them. I'm thinking of them all the time. And when I think of them, I pray for them, just like I do my own daughters. And I think that's what we need in life is women who are willing to do that for other people, to be present physically and to be present emotionally and spiritually for these people. But do I pray? Yes, I pray like crazy because I would not want to be the one to point someone in the wrong direction and point someone away from God.
Sure. One of the things that you write about, and I think is critical for every woman, is understanding purpose and identity.
Right.
Talk about the difference, because we get those conflated.
Yeah. So many women want to know what they're supposed to do with their life. I think that's like young women, especially millennials. They want to know what they're supposed to do. They graduated from college. What am I supposed to do now? And they have these desires and they have these thoughts. And many times they think of if they could just get their vocation set, they would feel better about themselves. But the truth is that, what you do with your life and who you are totally separate. And your identity is centered in the fact that God made you and he loves you and you're accepted by him, regardless of what faults you might have or even sin issues you might have. You are loved by God. It is by Jesus's gift of grace that we're able to have access to the Father. And that is like, for me, that's like a whole starting point with young women. It's like, you need to know, like, you are loved. You are adored. You're a dear daughter of God. And so that's kind of a starting point. That's your identity. Now, what you do with your life, your vocation, is totally different. And for me, like, I've had so many different kinds of jobs. And you don't just have to have, very few people graduate from college or, and know what they're going to do the rest of their lives, unless they're going to like med school. They're like focused and that's their thing, But most of us end up graduating and we try one thing, maybe we do another job, and that's okay. It's okay to be in discovery about what God wants you to do with your time and how he wants you to spend your life earning money to pay your bills and things like that. So identity and vocation are two separate things. And many times, I know for me, it took me a long time to kind of figure out my groove. Like, what am I supposed to do? And so, like, permission granted, if you're 30 years old and you're still trying to figure out what you're supposed to do with your life, that's okay. 110%, that's okay. But you need to know that who you are doesn't have anything to do with your discovery and what you're supposed to do.
It doesn't have to do with what you do. Who you are doesn't have to do with what you do. And you said 30 and older. I mean, 30, if you're 30 or even older, let me tell you something. It doesn't, and I love what you wrote in the book. And I think this is a critical piece. You talked about when you shared with your dad what you what you were going to major in, and see, but as women, again, it goes back to the first man, and you didn't get the approval from him.
No.
And he didn't disapprove, but he didn't approve. He didn't approve you.
Yes. And so that kind of sent me on a little like discovery mission when I was in college, and I took way too many hours, and bless his heart, he ended up paying for them, thank God. But and so we're very sensitive to approval from our earthly fathers. And like, you're right, he didn't disapprove, he just didn't approve it. And so it sent me on this little whirling thing. So I understand how it's confusing sometimes to figure out your vocation But just remember that your identity is something that doesn't change. Your vocation can change. And like I said, sometimes that's a long discovery process. And Henry Nouwen says, I want to read a quote because it's right here, but he said, it's very important to realize that our vocation is hidden in where we are and who we are. So those are just some clues that I love while you're figuring out what you're supposed to do with your life. Realize that it has to do with who God made you and his purpose for, you being a light in the life for other people. And you can do that if you're a kindergarten teacher or you're a big time attorney or you're sitting in a cubicle or you're at home taking care of toddlers, wherever you are, you can be the glory of God to someone else.
But don't you think, though, Susie, that all of those things that you did, and I know for me, all of the jobs that I had, they helped me to find my passion. They helped me to find my purpose. Had I not had all of those things, I wouldn't be able to sit here living and walking and working in my passion.
I totally agree. And Will, my husband always says God's been playful with me because he's let me try lots of different things. My husband was one of those people who knew exactly what he was supposed to do when he was 16. He went to seminary and did the thing, and now he's doing it. And so his life looks like a long, straight arrow.
Right.
And mine looks like curly cues, along the way. But it's like I've loved all the things I've gotten to do, and they've been all very different. And it's also like celebrating that this is my path with God, is these different curly cues to the eventual. And I celebrate that my husband has had just a straight arrow path on knowing exactly but neither one of those is wrong or right. It's just different.
I love it. So this Mother's Day, what would your words of wisdom be for mothers and daughters?
Oh, I don't know if I have words of wisdom. I just have a prayer.
Okay.
My prayer would be that God would allow you to connect and talk with your mother or your daughter in a way that is deeply meaningful, and that you would that the conversation would center around God wherever He is in your life. That would be my prayer. And whether that's you and your own mother or your own daughter, or you and a spiritual mama, or a dear daughter, just that you would have a multi-generational conversation where God is the center and where you could really give Him glory through your conversation and just knowing Him better.
I love it. Thank you so much, Susie, for taking the time. Before we got to go, quickly tell people how they can get the book, your podcast, and all of the resources that you have available.
Thank you so much. Well, I've had such a good time. The best place to find all that information is at Susie, SUSIE, Davis.org. I hang out on Instagram and Facebook, but you can find all the information at my website. And of course, the book's available at all the booksellers, Barnes and Nobles, and your independent small bookstore, and of course, Amazon. So I hope you get the book.
There you go. Susie, thank you again. Thank you for your wisdom. And thank you for the book.
Gracious. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This is my final point on point today. And of course, as we celebrate mothers around the world, we celebrate women like Susie Davis, who not only wrote letters to her spiritual daughters, but mentors young women and women from around the country that just need a mother to listen, to hear, to be present. And when you think about, when I think about a mother, it's so expansive because most of us just connected to the mother that we have. Now, many times we've heard of other mothers and bad mothers or mothers who are not present and mean mothers. And so when we take a look at Susie's ministry, I believe it's a call for every woman who is spirit-filled, who has a higher calling, who loves God, that we would take the opportunity and we would begin to seek out young women that we can help become who God has called them to be. And oftentimes we can get so busy in our daily lives that we just say, I don't have time. But there are so many women who haven't given birth, but are still mothering. And for all of those women who are mothering, we say kudos to you because you are making a difference. Sometimes it's just about being heard, being heard, being able to be authentic and tell your truth the way that you see it without being judged, and having someone who loves God and knows the word be able to listen and speak into your life. And I know personally from mothering two little people that I didn't give birth to that it is possible. It is possible when we come out of ourselves and we say, God, I am available. Who is it that you want me to be here for today? And what we know is that women, even from the earliest days, have been so competitive. Even as early as first grade, we start a spirit of competition that men, I think, don't necessarily have in the same way. And that competition carries us. We hold it, sometimes without even really knowing that we hold it. We hold it our whole lives. And what that competition and that comparison does is it keeps us from seeking out that woman, that sister, that mother, that friend that has the key to the next thing, opening the next thing in our lives. And we have allowed pettiness, which started even before we knew what it was, to stop those relationships. And so when I read this book and I read all of the stories that women had shared with Susie and the way that she responded, and I just started thinking about womanhood and the totality of womanhood, especially as we're right here at Mother's Day. And I started saying, you know, there was a time where women came together and we prayed. And so many amazing things happened from the prayers of women that they were not in competition with each other. They wanted the best for each other. And now we have picks and chooses of who we want the best for, who we want to see succeed, who we think is worthy to succeed. And this book really makes me think that there is a better way, and we can put that down. And I hope that it does for you as well if you decide to pick this book up and mentor, and you stop looking at what we think is elevation or should be elevation, and we start looking at why we're placed in a position to help someone in their passion, in their purpose, to help someone locate their identity and to know that they are not what they did. They are not who, what happened to them. That's not who they are. That's what happened. That might have been a definition at that time, but that doesn't have to define their whole lives. And when we can really open our hearts without condemnation, without judgment, and we can just be there. You know, I was reading a meditation the other day on the radio, and one of the things that it said is that we have to learn to just be. And in that moment, as I was meditating on just being, it took me to everything being could mean for me. And maybe you could do that for yourself. And I started getting a download. Be kind, be patient, be grateful, be willing, be authentic, be still. See, there's so many things for us to be if we'll just be. Be available to mentor someone. Be available to give someone an encouraging word. And as this Mother's Day approaches, so many friends and family will be without a mother. I know a couple that their mothers just within the last 90 days, one even within the week of Mother's Day, Their mothers have gone home to be with the Lord. And there is an emptiness and a sorrow and a hurt that only someone that has lost a mother could possibly understand. And there are so many people that can be available for them. But we have to come out of ourselves, and we just have to do it. We want to thank Susie Davis once again. The book is entitled Dear Daughters, Love Letters to the Next Generation. And we should all have letters that we write to the next generation that describe who they are and whose they are. We wish every mother a happy Mother's Day. That's been my final point on Point today. Stay with us. We're back right after this.